All right. Good afternoon. Welcome to our redistricting information session on redistricting in the city of Rochester. We're happy to share information about this process with you today and a little bit of background. A lot has changed for the process. The 2020 census was delayed due to the pandemic, so that in turn did delay the results from the census. We received our data in August of this year. Normally that's released in April, but now we're trying to share it widely. We did experience significant growth in Rochester since 2020, at least 13.6%, and that was outpacing the state of Minnesota, which grew at about 7.6%. As a result, all ward boundaries will likely need to change to achieve roughly equal population in wards. So today, let's go over our agenda really quick. So we're going to cover all of these topics. We're going to start with just a general overview of what redistricting is. We'll talk about the Rochester and Minnesota 2020 census info. We'll also talk about the requirements for redistricting and the current Rochester Ward Maps. We'll talk about the website we have up and running and also some upcoming events, and we will have it open to questions. You are welcome to drop your questions in the chat and we will get those asked for you. Right now, I'm going to turn it over to Heather Heyer, who is the management analyst with the City of Rochester. Heather.
Thank you so much. So I think I'm actually going to stop sharing my screen for a second because the first clip I'm going to show is a video and I want to be able to share my audio. So hang on for 1 second. All right. So I am going to play this video.
In 2020, you likely participated in the U.S. Census survey. The U.S. Census is taken every 10 years and is an official count of people living in the U.S. It provides detailed information on things like race, geography, education, public health, and so much more. Now that the results for the 2020 census are in for Olmsted County and the city of Rochester, we can now begin the process of redistricting for our area. So what is redistricting and why should it matter to you? Redistricting is the redrawing of electoral district boundaries every 10 years to account for population shifts and growth over the previous decade.
Well, that stopped for a second. Hang on.
House of Representatives, the Minnesota
Here we go. I'm going to start right here.
Redistricting impacts all levels of government, including the U.S. House of Representatives, the Minnesota State Legislature, local school boards, city councils, and county boards. The names you see on your August 9th primary ballot in 2022 could also be impacted because of the changes to district boundaries. The first step in the process in Minnesota is the state legislative districts. If the state legislature is unable to reach an agreement on redistricting by the deadlines outlined in the statute, a judicial panel appointed by the Minnesota Supreme Court steps in to redraw the lines. Over the next few months, you may hear about different opportunities to participate in the local redistricting process that follow the state, such as listening sessions with groups that make up our unique landscape. The Minnesota Office of the Secretary of State provides guidelines to local jurisdictions, which include the required deadlines. Not all districts will need to be redrawn. There is specific criteria that outline when that's necessary. March 29, 2022 is the deadline for redistricting municipal precincts and wards where it's appropriate. And April 26, 2022 is the deadline for all other districts to be completed. That includes county commissioner districts, school board member districts, and soil and water conservation districts where appropriate. Following redistricting, the election process can begin with candidate filing and primary election dates, which also follows a schedule determined by state statute. We want you to be informed about the redistricting process. A free redistricting toolkit can be found at several area locations, like the Rochester Public Library. That free toolkit, along with other information regarding redistricting, can also be found on the City of Rochester and Olmsted County websites.
All right, awesome. So thank you to our partners over at Olmsted County for creating that wonderful little quick tutorial on what redistricting is. I am going to just talk about quickly what the timeline looks like for redistricting. So here we have, as you can see, we're starting out in November with listening sessions that will begin likely right before the holidays. We're doing this information session now, but again, we'll be doing some listening sessions along with the county to get feedback from the community about redistricting. In December, the Rochester City Council will begin the process of adopting some redistricting principles. In January, we'll start to summarize the themes from all the listening sessions that we've hosted along with Olmsted County. And then February is when we are expecting the legislative districts to be finalized. So you just heard in that video, there is a deadline, February 15th, for the legislature to complete the map drawing. However, for the last 4 decades, the legislature has failed to meet that deadline, and a judicial branch has stepped in and done the drawing of the maps. So even with that expected delay, possibly, we know the judicial branch has already started their process. So we would still expect maps, hopefully by the end of February, so that we can begin our process. So once we receive the legislative files from the state, we can begin in the city redrawing our ward boundaries and precinct boundaries. And those are due, the deadline is March 29th. So once we've completed that, then the county can take over and they redraw county commissioner district maps. And again, they have a deadline of April 26th for that. So you can see this is actually a very short window, depending on if we get those maps on February 15th or February 28th, let's say, we only have 3 or 4 weeks to do the map drawing in Rochester, and then we turn it over and the county has about the same amount of time to do their map drawing. So speaking of precincts and wards, what the heck are they? All right, let me go to the next slide here. So what is a precinct? This is really a basic geographic area that are used for elections. Ballots are and results are generally reported at the precinct level. And political parties also utilize precinct information for organizing and outreach efforts. And so you can see kind of all these little numbers on this screen, which is pretty small, but I've got red circles around them. Those are wards and precincts. The precincts are within the wards there. And then wards are the districts that some cities use to elect members of city council. So in Minnesota, there are over 850 cities, but only 70 use wards for electing council members. The other cities elect their council members at large. So the City of Rochester's charter requires that there be 6 wards, and you can see that is our current ward map on the side, and we'll look at this closer here in a minute. And some of you may be saying, well, wait a second, there are 7 members on council, and that's true because we elect our 7th member at large and they serve as the council president. All right, so Rochester, Minnesota by the numbers. Karen mentioned that we did get our census data in August. It was a couple months later than normal, but we had a lot of growth. Rochester grew by about 13.6%. So that was about 14,000 new residents since 2010. So the population of Rochester is now 121,395. Going down on this table here, you can see if we split Rochester equally, divide by 6 and round up slightly, that means our ideal ward size will be 20,233. And then I just have a couple other notes here too, for comparison's sake. Minnesota's population grew just over 7.5%, and you can see the congressional district ideal size is about 713,000. And then we retained our 8th seat. That was kind of exciting when they announced that we just barely beat out New York to keep our 8th seat here in Minnesota and New York State last one. And then the Minnesota Senate ideal size is about 85,000, and the Minnesota House size is half of that at 42,000 or so. Now, there are several requirements that kind of guide our conversation and what we can do with redistricting. So there are federal and state requirements, and I'm just going to briefly mention them here. So equal in size is a requirement, and that they must not be from the federal government. They also must not be drawn with either the purpose or effect of abridging the right of any citizen to vote on account of race, ethnicity, or membership in a language minority group, and otherwise must comply with the 14th and 15th Amendments and the Voting Rights Act. The Minnesota state law also requires that they be convenient and contiguous territory and that they are compact. And then in Rochester, our charter requires that there are 6 wards that are of compact contiguous territory and shall contain nearly as practicable an equal population. Wherever possible, ward boundary lines shall follow the center lines of streets, avenues, alleys, and boulevards and shall run due east, west, north, and south. So then I will jump into our current Rochester Ward Map. So you can see here on this map, we have 6 wards that are in different colors. I'll start by describing the growth we've seen overall. So Rochester, like I mentioned, grew about 13.6% compared to 2010, and Ward 1 and 3 had the most growth since 2010 with 24.7% and 24.1% respectively. So here, the Rochester Ward 1 is the southernmost part of Rochester, and the current council member is Councilmember Patrick Keene. The total census population from 2020 is 22,017 members. So like we mentioned, that's a growth of 24.7%. Ward 2 here is on the central western side of Rochester, and that is currently represented by Councilmember Mark Bransford. The census population currently is 19,328, which is 7.8% growth since 2010. Rochester Ward 3, so the northwest corner, is currently served by Councilmember Nick Campion. The population is 22,051. The growth about 24.1%. Rochester Ward 4 is central and east of Rochester, and it is served by Councilmember Kelly Ray Kirkpatrick with a population of 19,224, which is a growth of 8.2% since 2010. Ward 5 is north and east part of Rochester, served by Councilmember Sean Palmer. The population is 19,779, and the growth is 11.5% since 2010. And Ward 6 is central and north of northern part of Rochester, and the population is 18,983 with a growth of 5.9% from 2010. So I'm actually going to cycle back here a couple slides, and I'm going to go to this main map here. So remember earlier I mentioned that if you divide Rochester's current population by 6, our equal size would be about 20,233. And so you can see here where there are 2 wards that will need to lose some population, and the remaining wards will all need to gain a little population. I think I saw a question in the chat. So we currently do have participants muted. Oops, excuse me. Oh, and I think Karen just mentioned that. And we can answer your questions through the chat at this time. If you have some, you can go ahead and put them in there. I'm going to pop back over. So the video that we showed at the beginning did mention that we will be doing some Rochester redistricting toolkits along with Olmsted County, and those are we're preparing those now. Those will essentially outline some of the requirements that are necessary for redistricting, but provide an opportunity for people to give us feedback on the maps or on what they would like to see drawn. We will be asking for definitions or not definitions, excuse me, information and feedback from the community about what term that is coming up in this redistricting cycle, and it is really thinking about groups of people that are possibly geographically linked and have common social, economic, racial, or ethnic interests, and that they would potentially have a benefit from being together in the same district. So we're interested in what communities of interest exist in Rochester, and if we're able to collect that information and get community feedback on that, that is what we're looking for. So we will have more information on our website when those toolkits become available. But I did want to pull up our website real quick here. Let me close the and other tabs I have going on. So this is our lovely redistricting website, and there's a scrolling bar up at the top with our events and press releases, essentially our most current news. We have the timeline graphic, which you've seen here in our presentation a couple of times, with another tab for events. So this has our past events and our upcoming events. So as we release our calendar of listening sessions, that'll be in this space as well. We also have our maps available on this page, and you can download them here as well. So rather than just, taking a look at the map, you can download it and print it for yourself. And this is where we'll include information about those toolkits when we get those finalized. There's also a ton of helpful resources here, including the wonderful video we just watched. There's several different tools from across the state and country, really, including the National Conference of State Legislature here, which is a great resource, includes information from other states. And then a handful of frequently asked questions here, which is most of the information I just covered with that part of the presentation. And I am going to jump back over to my PowerPoint. Alrighty. So as we mentioned that too, I did want to point out that we will have a study session next Monday, the 15th of November. It starts at 3:30 p.m. And this will be where we introduce our redistricting principles and policy to City Council for their feedback. We would like, community to listen into. We will then pair up some of our listening sessions or collect information from the public prior to council adoption of redistricting principles and policies in early December. So here's information about that upcoming event on Monday. Yeah, so that's all I have, and I think we'll jump over to our questions if we have any coming in so far.
And again, if you have a question, feel free to drop it in the chat. And I'm not seeing any questions right now.
I can make sure. Kurt, I just unmuted you, and then you can unmute yourself as well. Kurt, do you have a little speaker icon that you can click on on your...
Perfect.
Okay. Hi, I have a question. You see, I'm from there's a district which is Ward number 2, and I have a question. Let's see, when will the city finish its census of the redistricting area? And I understand it's a lengthy process. There's a lot of this and there to go through, but when is the greatest of time when this could be done?
Thank you, Kurt, for that question. So we will really start the process of drawing the maps at the beginning of March of 2022. And then the deadline to submit our completed map is March 29th of 2022.
Okay.
Wonderful. Any other questions, Kurt?
That'll be it.
Thank you. I'm gonna mute you again.
And I'm not seeing other questions in the chat. Does anybody else have a question? Looks like you answered all the questions, Heather.
All of them. This process will, obviously continue for a while. I will be having lots of listening sessions for people to participate in as well and get feedback and answer questions.
And again, information is available throughout this process on the city's website, rochestermn.gov/redistricting. All right, I still see an empty chat, so well done answering questions.
Thank you.
Even before they were asked.
All right, I see possibly having something come in from Jenna. Otherwise, we can probably wrap this up early. All right. Well, thank you so much. We will post this as well on our website, so this information will be available, and we'll have another session, repeat of this session this evening at 6 p.m. Thank you, everyone.